viewers. My name is Gabisile Mngcono from the Buffalo City Metropolitan District. Welcome to the Eastern Cape Department of Education Broadcast Studio. Today I will be covering English First Additional Language Paper 2 prescribed poem entitled Reciprocities for My Mother. The poet is Cathal Lagan. Let us start by reading the poem, and then after that we will navigate our way through the title, the writer, as well as some parts of the poem to help you understand what it is about. The poem reads as follows. She gave me skeins of wool to hold out like a priest at mass, with stern rubrics not to fidget, while she wound it into a ball, unwinding me, unraveling my hands and arms, checking my lapses with a gentle tug, when I wandered off through images her chat had made, for though she kept the line between us taut, she kept my heart at ease with all her talk. And when her ball compacted grew, and my few strands fell limp away, I knew there was no loss, for she would knit it back again to fit me perfectly. But richer still, I see today these lines are drawn out from me to knit through this faltering verse a thread of memory time has pulled away from consciousness. This is a poem that was written by Cathal Lagan entitled Reciprocities. Now, when we study poetry, what we need to familiarize ourselves with is the writer himself. This time we are going to focus closely on what Lagan, the writer, has done. He was born in 1937 and therefore would currently be in his late 80s. There is no date of death because Cathal Lagan is still alive. He grew up in Ireland. He has been a sailor, he has been a priest, he has been a university lecturer in English literature and a poet. He lectured English in the University of Fort Hare. He immigrated to South Africa, particularly to the Eastern Cape, which is where he currently lives, in King Williamstown. In this poem, he explores his memories of an event from his childhood when he was growing up in Ireland a long time ago. This implies the incident described in the poem took place at his home around the 1940s and the 1950s. In this poem, he interprets this event from his perspective as an adult. In other words, the poem is a memoir. It's a way in which he remembers his childhood and how much of a role his mother played in his life. It is therefore a tribute, or what we call an ode, to his mother. Hence, part of the title indicates For My Mother. Now, the title itself, which is the next step in poetry analysis, the title is Reciprocities. We need to understand what reciprocities are or what reciprocities mean. The meaning of the noun reciprocities, that is a verb, reciprocate, a verb, an act of returning kindness, or an act of returning generosity, an act of support to someone that you love. And so when you reciprocate, that is what you are doing. They are called reciprocities because they are referring to the kindnesses or the generosity that you have extended or that you are returning to someone. The title itself is in plural form. In other words, it's a two-way thing. It is when one person is involved and there is more than one instance of kindness that has been done. Then the subtitle, which says For My Mother, is regarded as an ode. In other words, this is a lyric poem containing thoughts of respect on the part of the writer as he reminisces about this incident, which reminds him of how he grew up, which reminds him of how his mother molded him into what he has become just by using one incident of extending wool for his mother to knit a nice jersey for him. So when we put everything in context, the title Reciprocities, literally, is the young son helping his mother winding her ball of wool. And with this wool, the mother will knit a jersey that is going to help the son as it gets cold in winter, even in Ireland. However, figuratively, we have got to remember that the mother teaches the young son life lessons based on her moral values. The son will learn good life lessons that he may be unaware of at the time because he is young. The title implies a positive and loving relationship between the mother and son, one of give and take. When this action was taking place, the son was not aware. He's reflecting on it as an adult, remembering how the mother taught him how to actually wind down the wool that was going to help knit him a warm jersey. And he uses what we call a metaphor to compare that to molding his behavior in making him the good person that he is now as an adult. That is the title. Then we move on to the very first line. The first line, which reads, "She gave me skeins of wool." We are familiar with all other words in that line except for skeins. What is a skein, or what are skeins? Loops of wool, possibly from an old jersey which has been unraveled for reuse. Jersey that has been made loose so that the wool can be reused. There is something else that we learn from this. Now, in context, the title Reciprocities, literally, is the young son helping his mother winding her ball of wool. And with this wool, the mother will knit a jersey that is going to help the son as it gets cold in winter, even in Ireland. However, figuratively, we have got to remember that the mother teaches the young son life lessons based on her moral values. The son will learn good life lessons that he may be unaware of at the time because he is young. The title implies a positive and loving relationship between the mother and son, one of give and take. When this action was taking place, the son was not aware. He's reflecting on it as an adult, remembering how the mother taught him how to actually wind down the wool that was going to help knit him a warm jersey. And he uses what we call a metaphor to compare that to molding his behavior in making him the good person that he is now as an adult. That is the title. Then we move on to the very first line. The first line, which reads, "She gave me skeins of wool." We are familiar with all other words in that line except for skeins. What is a skein, or what are skeins? Loops of wool, possibly from an old jersey which has been unraveled for reuse. Jersey that has been made loose so that the wool can be reused. There is something else that we learn from skeins of wool. A skein is a loop of wool from an old jersey which has been unknitted. In other words, which has been undone in order to reuse the wool. Let's say maybe the jersey has been damaged, and so the mother would decide that, okay, I'm going to undo this jersey so that I can get the wool and remake a new jersey. This is what was happening. The loops must be rolled into a ball for easy knitting. You can see now what is going on there, where the mother has the wool that she is holding on the left-hand side picture. Now the character, the mother, is implying that the the mother is a fragile person, also implying that his mother lived in difficult circumstances. How do we know this? We would expect that for someone to knit a jersey, they would need to buy the wool and make the jersey. But the fact that the wool is reused would also possibly imply that this was not a rich family. They did not have enough funds to buy the wool. The verb gave, which is used in that first line, indicates a firm instruction from the mother, who probably said, give me the wool and hold it in a certain way so that I am able to knit a good jersey as we continue. Now you will notice a lot of enjambment in this poem. Enjambment is where no punctuation is used. By enjambment, we mean there is no comma or full stop between the end of a line and the next line. Even in this first line, there is no punctuation. Do not mind that we have an ellipsis there. It's to indicate that we are still continuing with the next line. What is the enjambment meant to achieve in this poem? It is meant to show continuity. As this wool is wound down, there must be no break in how the wool gets to the mother. So that enjambment into line 2 is linking the idea of the looping wool onto the ongoing winding thereof. Now let us move on to the next line, which is line number 2, where the speaker says, to hold out like a priest at mass. We would have to spend a long time explaining what mass is, but I will explain it using a Roman Catholic Church language or Anglican Church language. Mass is a gathering of church people where there is a service. And when we are talking about a mass, we are talking about a normal church on a regular service. People go to church, and you can see the priest there. I want to point at the priest. You can see the priest here. The priest there is extending his hand, and there is a cross to indicate that this is a church. To hold out like a priest at mass, once we see that, we know that there is a metaphor involved. We cannot move with the mother and son in their home knitting and then to a church. So we get a figure of speech in line 2. What is happening there? The son's straight arms holding the loops of wool are compared to the straight arms of a priest blessing his congregation. Remember now, the act of holding the wool, one has to have separate hands, just like the priest's hands here, which you can see there. You can see the priest here, that the priest is extending his two hands in order for the wool not to be wound up the wrong direction. The son had to also extend his hands like that. That is where the comparison is. Now, when we look at the son giving his mother his obedience and time, this is something that the writer remembers about this action. And the priest would give blessings to the people in his church. So your way of explaining the simile there, what is the similarity between holding out the hands of the priest and the holding out of the hands of the son as he is helping his mother? It is that the hands had to be held like that to ensure that the wool does not take the wrong turn. However, that is compared to a priest blessing a church. Now, what is ironic about this is the fact that, remember, in the background we said the current Cather is actually a priest. So it is as if he was practicing to become a priest when he was extending his hand. His mother, he believes that his mother was molding him just for that act. We then move on to the next line, to line number 3. Line number 3 and 4. With stern rubrics not to fidget, while she wound it into a ball, unwinding me, wound it into a ball. Please make sure that you read the word correctly. Stern means strict and firm. The tone there with stern instructions. When somebody is speaking to you sternly, it means they are giving you stern, firm instructions. You can see the word there, strict instructions. So we would say the tone in those lines is firm, it is strict, with stern rubrics, meaning a list of requirements, the orders taken from the mother, just like the orders from a priest in a church, which is the extended metaphor that we get there. The mother's tone and instructions to her son are firm, just like a priest would do in a church. The mother does not require her son to just help her, but she needs her to obey to the instructions. So this is something that the writer remembers very vividly. While she wound it into a ball, that is the wool, the action of turning the long loop's wool from a son's hands into a functional ball is something that the son always remembers, just like in the previous stanza. Now, as you read the word, don't read it as wound. The word wound is the past tense of wind, to wind something. It is not a wound, because then it would mean something else. Now, when he says unwinding me, this means sort of molding me in a certain way so that I become what I'm supposed to become. Unwinding the wool loops from his hands into the ball. That is the literal meaning. Then the meaning that is figurative, having a calming or relaxing influence on his son. This hints at a dreamlike mood being created. So when we look at the act of the mother, what is strange about this line is the fact that as much as the mother is giving strict instructions, but she is doing so in a loving way, in a way of training the child to become a responsible person, which is what he is today. We then move on to the next lines number 5 and 6, and note the enjambment that I spoke about here as well. Unraveling my hands and arms, checking my lapses with a gentle tug. The meaning of unraveling, meaning to pull loose the loops of wool around the son's hands, rolling it into a ball. To pull loose, when she is knitting, the wool has to continuously, she has to be fed, if I can use that term, with the wool, for her to be able to continue with the process. Unravel, the wool is in a shape of a roll held by the son, but it has to be made loose. My hands and arms checking. Note the hands and arms. The figure of speech is a synecdoche. A synecdoche is a figure of speech where we can see there the synecdoche. It's a figure of speech where a part of a body is used to represent the whole person. In this case, the synecdoche hands and arms represent the son, implying that his mind was wandering. So his mother had to keep on checking what is it that he was doing. Now, when you look at the rest of the poem, from stanza 1 up to the 3rd stanza, you will see that what the poet is doing is telling us about the action. When I wandered through the images, and the mother keeps on calling him again to come back to this act. When you get to stanza 3, you can see now in line 16 that the writer now is reflecting on what has happened in his childhood. Much time has passed, and the speaker is now an adult living in the Eastern Cape. His mother had passed away a long time ago, but in stanza 3, he is comparing his childhood memory to the poem. Hence, the poem is dedicated to his mother, as he remembers what his mother has done through his childhood, molding him into the obedient person that he is today, the priest that he is today. All this act of winding wool is something that he remembers, which made him what he has become. We have now come to the end of our lesson. You can leave your questions and comments. Don't forget to leave the name of your school so we give a shout out to you. Please share, recommend, and subscribe to our YouTube channel. Thank you for watching. See you on our next lesson.